Hey everyone, welcome back to Watch and Carry. So in today's video, I've got another customer's project that I'm going to be showing to you. This is going to be going out to Carlos. Really nice guy. He reached out to me on my Watch and Carry channel on Instagram and said, hey man, I was wondering if you could do like maybe a yellow in the analog clock, a blue on the rest of these triple displays, and then maybe let's take out that world time here at the top and the illuminator on the bottom. So usually I don't take custom requests. I usually purchase my filters ahead of time. But I did have some extra filters laying around. This week was a little bit lighter than most on a customer project, so I said, "Hey man, let's go for it. Let's try to make that mod happen for you." So he's going to be having this done on the ever popular Casio World Time AE1200. Go ahead and check the description for the link on where to buy it. And this is the one I usually only do the label removal on. So as I've mentioned in other videos, the stainless steel version is a resin case, even though it's called a stainless steel. But because it's a silver case, it really hides the swirl marks when you try to remove that text. If you have like a black case, a red, or a green, even the blue World Times, it doesn't look as good. But on this one, it looks perfect. So I have no problem doing that for him. All right, let's take a tour of some of the materials you're going to be needing. So you'll go ahead and need a micro screwdriver here, a lug removal tool. This one actually we don't need. That's usually what I use to resize the bracelet, but Carlos hasn't mentioned that. I'm going to reach out to him just to make sure he doesn't want me to do that for him. And then toothpick, a little, or something pointed helps out quite a bit. I've got my plastic tweezers here. Ignore this stuff here. That's for another project. We've got a few Q-tips. So we're going to be using a pair of Q-tips along with some Goo Gone to remove that labeling off the case. And then we've got another set of Q-tips here to apply the super glue. To these Q-tips, I actually pinch the tips with a pair of pliers. You can see how that's a little bit more pointed than that end right there. That just helps you to be a little bit more precise when applying the glue. A pair of scissors are always helpful, so I got my always trusty Victorinox scissors here. Super glue, some Goo Gone, and then I have this brand new air blaster actually, which is saving me money from buying those compressed can versions. And this just helps to blast a little bit of that dust away from the case or the filters before we reinstall everything back. Got a little microfiber towel here to wipe off some of that extra Goo Gone, and a very fine cloth to clean up the filters and the display before I ship that over to Carlos. And then a good soft work mat to protect that finish on the plastic display for the glass on this Casio. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and get started. These Casios sometimes come with this protective film. I like to leave that on if it's on there. And then we'll open up this case, take out this protective sheet for the bracelet, and we'll reinstall that back on later. Take your lug removal tool here. And let's go ahead and go to those 18mm spring bars and pry one side out. There we go. Just watch that spring bar because it tends to shoot out. And then we're going to go ahead and do the other side as well. Okay. All right, bracelet's all set. We can set that guy to the side. Let's go ahead and grab our micro screwdriver here. Now you've got 4 screws here on the case back. Go ahead and remove those. And I've got a little bit of a allergy flare-up today, so I apologize if I'm sniffing throughout the video. Okay. Set those small screws to the side. And we'll take this case back, lift it up. You have this rubber O-ring here. We can actually leave that in place for now, but if it happens to fall off, actually let's take that out. Just in case it falls off, I'll show you how to put that back in. I kind of like to be a little bit thorough and go step by step here. Take something a little bit small and pointed and go for that 6 o'clock or that 12 o'clock position. And it doesn't matter which side you choose, gently pry up. And this is the internal watch module. So we're going to lift this up. go ahead and take something flat. Be careful not to touch the inside glass. You're really just going to try to reach underneath that masking. Try to lift it up, and then go ahead and take your watch module, put that back in. And then I like to take my case back and put that gently over. I'm not going to screw it down. I just reseal this up so that we don't get as much dust going into that internal case, because that can be a little bit of a chore to remove. All right, so as I mentioned here, we are going to be going with a yellow here and a blue over here. So I've talked to Carlos beforehand to kind of see which colors he was feeling. He wanted a little bit of a darker yellow, so I said, hey man, how about this 104 deep amber? And he was happy with that. And then we're going to be doing for the blue, like a Pepsi blue is what he wanted. And so we're doing a 144 no color blue. So when you see 144 and you see 104, those are actually the exact code numbers for Lee Filters, which is the brand. And then this is the title for that specific color. So if you wanted to get a bigger sheet of this blue or this yellow, what you would do is go to eBay, or you can go to Lee Filters website directly and type in that name or that code, and that is what should be popping up for you. Personally, I order from eBay. I'll put the seller down in the description below. If you want to go ahead and just get a sample kit, let's say this is your first time modding, you're not sure if you want to commit to a really big piece of filter paper, and let's say you hate the color and now you're stuck with it, you can get this sample booklet. This is called a swatch book, again by Lee Filter Brands, and these are about $5, maybe $6 shipped off of eBay, so very, very cheap. I think sometimes if you even contact Lee Filters and say, hey, you know, I'm probably going to buy a bigger set of filters in the future. I was wondering if I could take a look at your sample kit. Sometimes I've heard they will go ahead and ship this to you for free if you just go ahead and pay for the shipping. So not too bad there. So let's go ahead and do this yellow first. This is actually my favorite shade of yellow to use. I guess it's more of an amber. So what I like to do is take that filter like that. I like to inspect the filter first. So what I will do is have some good light, like you can see here, kind of take a look at the filter left to right, up and down. Make sure there's no creases. These filters are very delicate, so it's easy to put a crease in there. And it would be such a shame if you go ahead and install a filter, do all the work of putting it back in the watch, and then when you try to wear the watch, you notice that there's a crease, because it will definitely come out in direct sunlight. So take a look at that filter, make sure it looks good. If you see any fingerprints, I know we're still touching this, but now's a good time to wipe some of it away, because the filter is easier to clean now than when it's installed onto the watch. So that looks pretty good. So I'm looking here at this filter. I can already see that here at the top, you probably won't see it on camera, right above my fingernail, there's a part that will not clean off with the microfiber. So I'm going to trim that off, set that to the side, and I'm going to focus just beneath that where I have something nice and clean. Yeah, that looks a lot better. So what I'll do is I'll take my masking, which is this part in my left hand. I'm going to put this underneath the filter. And then I will take a Sharpie, which you'll also need. This fine tip Sharpie is what I like to use, a little bit more precise. Put that filter right over the cutout for that hole. Make sure that it is enough to cover that area. And then I'll draw this line here at the bottom where I will make my cut with my scissors. And it's just a rough cut for now. So we'll set that to the side and we'll cut this guy off here. And then I like to trim off any of the Sharpie just because I don't want that showing up on the display. Perfect. All right, so now what I'll do is I will put this back over the filter. Try to use tweezers here to prevent fingerprint smudges, and kind of play around with it just to make sure that this is the right size before we move on to that blue filter. So we have just enough here to fit. Now, as I've mentioned in my previous videos, when you are sizing these up, don't cut the filter slightly bigger than the hole. Okay, so obviously I need this whole entire hole punch out to be filled, but I wouldn't want to make this too thin. For example, some people might go ahead and start cutting out, you know, the filter right here like a very small perimeter that's slightly larger than the hole. You really want a lot of extra filter here on these bigger pieces of plastic that are solid, because when we put our super glue down, we're going to sandwich that glue between the filter on the top and the masking on the bottom. Of course, when you sandwich glue, the glue will spread out, and if the filter is too thin and there's not a big border like you see these big chunks here, that glue is going to start seeping into the display, and then we're going to have to do the project all over again. So nice thick borders. I'm happy with that. So I will go ahead and set this guy to the side. All right, now let's move on to the blue. Now this is a pretty cool color of blue he chose here. I have not worked with this color yet, so I'm very curious to see how this is going to turn out. So again, we're going to check our filter in the light. That looks pretty good. Let's get some of these prints off. Yeah, that looks good. And then we'll take our filter, lay that down. And because we're cutting out a big piece, I like to put my filters all the way smack to the corner here. And then I'll take my Sharpie and then I'll trace right along here. It's going to basically be a letter L that we're cutting out. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's trim off these edges a little bit, make it a little bit cleaner. Okay, now we're going to have a bunch of extra here. I like to save these for future projects. Okay, and then right here at like the 10 o'clock position, I like to bevel this edge a little bit. And then also right here at the 7 o'clock, let's bevel that edge also. Okay, kind of like that. Now the reason why we're beveling those edges is, let's test fit this again to make sure it's perfect, is you can see here that the corners of the masking, you see how the corners here are beveled, 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 beveled. So we got to bevel these two sides. This one's already beveled. So that's good. Let's go ahead and take a look at the size here. Let's look for those thick borders for the glue. Nice thick border here, a thick border here, and a thick one on the bottom. It doesn't have to be thick all the way around because I wouldn't recommend putting like a whole perimeter of glue. That's, for me, a little bit of overkill. You know, super glue is not cheap, so you don't want to, you know, put too much glue on this. So right here on the top and on the bottom is where I'm going to put that. So I'm happy. And then again, my filter is of course covering that cutout, and that cutout. So that's going to look pretty good. So let's set this guy to the side as well. Okay. Okay, so we've got our filter here. We'll go ahead and grab our super glue. So this is the brand I'm using here. Loctite for me and super glue brand, I think they're all the same thing. I will tell you that this delivery device where you have this hard container and these two tabs to squeeze and this really nice cap here is so much easier to dispense than having the super glue brand, which at least in my store at CVS, it comes in a thin, almost like toothpaste style of tube. Very, very small, but those tubes, you know, they're very hard to squeeze out just a drop of glue. I end up either squeezing not enough or too much and wasting it. So I like this because it's a little bit more precise with these tabs. So I would highly recommend this. All right, and so what we'll do is let's get that yellow one in first. So what I like to do is, you know, have everything laid out nice and organized because super glue dries really quick and I don't want to spend too much time positioning these filters. So if you'll notice here, I lay my masking to the left. So this is the normal orientation. I turn it to the left like this, and I have this little drop-off point here on the right side, so it's easy for me to grab my filters underneath. If you lay your filters down on a flat surface like that, you can see it's hard to pick up the filter. And then you have to use your fingers to pick it up, and then you get fingerprints, and by the time you clean it, the glue is dry, and then point is you want to have everything nice and organized. So I have this here, and then I have this here. Not only that, I have it in the orientation that I want, so I can just lift it up and apply it. I don't have to lift it up and like turn my hand at a weird angle. Again, whatever you can do to expedite the process, I think makes it a little bit easier. Then for the blue, I'll probably be turning this back this way and dropping it in that way because that's a little bit easier. So I'm happy to lay my filter like that for the blue. Okay, so let's go ahead and get this super glue ready. So we will take our Q-tip. Again, what I like to do is take a pair of pliers. Let me just show you how I do that. Now these are pointed Q-tips. You can just type in Amazon pointed Q-tips or precise Q-tips. They're not your normal Q-tips. And then I pinch the very tip right there so it's nice and pointed. And I like to use at least 2, so I'm going to get this all prepped. All right, so all my materials are set. I don't have to think anymore. Okay, let's get our super glue here. Take our pointed Q-tip. Again, we're doing that left filter first. And then we'll squeeze just enough like that, just a drop. Okay, and then I will apply that here. And I like to apply it as far away from the cutout, which is that hole, as possible. Okay, and then another little drop here. Apply that over here. Okay, if you feel like this is too goopy, there's too many big pieces of glue, take the other side of that Q-tip and wipe off the extra. Don't spend too much time though. And then once you feel like you have a good amount of glue there, go ahead and take your filter and take your toothpick and then lay it down on one edge. And then hold that edge down with the Q-tip gently and lay that other end down. Okay, just like that. And then what I'd like to do is take this Q-tip and gently push down on the glue to kind of spread it out and let it adhere to that filter. Okay, you can see here these darker marks of glue. That's that glue spreading out. So had I applied this glue way too close to the cutout, that would already be bleeding, or not bleeding, but leaking into the area where I would be seeing it when I reinstalled the watch. Okay. Okay, so now that we've got that laid in, what I like to do is kind of lift it up. I want to check around the perimeter here. I want to make sure that this filter is definitely covering that hole. And then I'll turn it over and I'll turn it to the left and to the right, up and down. And sometimes if your filter is cut a little bit too short and you turn it to the side, you'll see the display underneath the yellow, and the display is white. So it obviously won't look all yellow, which is, you know, not what you want. So I really like to check left, right, up, and down. And then, you know, once I'm happy with that, we'll go ahead and set that guy down. Don't press too hard when you're pushing down on that glue, just a really, really light tap. If you press too hard, sometimes you're really gonna spread that glue too far into that main opening, which you don't wanna do. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the blue portion. I'm gonna use a brand new Q-tip for this one. Okay, and then for here, we're gonna be putting glue 1, 2, and then 3 sides right here, okay? Again, try to stay as far away from the cutouts as you can. Sometimes on certain edges it's a little bit harder to avoid because it's just a very thin border. But what we can do is just paint that glue on like that. Okay, flip your Q-tip over and then go to the closer edge where the cutout is and clean up that extra. So that way we don't have too much of that going into the opening of that filter. So right there, I'm kind of taking off that extra. That's a little bit too close to the cutouts for me. We'll go ahead and take our filter here, turn this back to the right, and then apply it like that. and then hold it down with the toothpick. And then what you want to do is on these maskings for the world time, let me show you here. This piece of plastic here is actually raised higher than this piece of plastic. Can you see that? That's a little bit raised. So what you want to do is when you put this filter down, you want to make sure that the edges of the filter, like here, here, and here, are not on top of these raised edges. They should be lower than that. You see that here? You see how this black piece of plastic on the masking is higher than the blue filter? That's good. The black here is higher than the blue, so that's good. And then the black here is higher than the blue, so that's a good sign, okay? And then again, we're gonna go ahead and kind of turn our, oh yeah, we'll go ahead and tap this down a little bit, very gently. So that looks good. Go ahead and lift this up. And let's check our work. Flip this guy over. Again, we're gonna kind of turn this to the left. Okay, so everything looks good, everything looks nice and covered. And then what we'll do is we'll turn this back this way so you're looking at the back of the masking and set this down gently, okay? I don't like to lay this down on the filter itself because this is the side that has glue. If you do that, that glue is also going to pick up a little bit of the dust or maybe the fibers that you have here off of your Q-tip, and then that's going to be a little bit harder to remove. You might end up damaging that filter and have to repeat the cutout again. So I lay that face down. Okay, so that's good to go. What we'll do is we'll let that sit for a few minutes. It's probably dry now, but I just like to make sure. Let that filter and glue really get adhered together. Let it cure into that plastic, and I'll check back with you guys in 5 minutes. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes. Let's lift up on our masking, trying to avoid touching that as much as possible on the filter side. I'm going to take my dust blaster here. Check the description, by the way, if you want the model of this. And we're just going to lightly kind of apply some air in one direction here. Okay, then we'll turn this over and be a little bit more gentle on this side because if you blow too hard with the duster, it's going to push that filter off. Turn the masking to the left and right because sometimes you can pick up little specks of dust that are hard to see. Okay, now sometimes what will happen here is you'll have a piece of dust. For example, I can see one here that you probably can't see on the camera. So what I'll do is I'll take a clean Q-tip and I'll just gently try to use a little rubbing to get this piece of dust off. Okay, if there's any glue here like that, the glue that's exposed here, try to avoid touching that with the Q-tip because the little hairs or fibers on the Q-tip will be stuck there, and then sometimes you can see that fiber of Q-tip going into the display. Okay, so if you see any dust that's a little bit more adherent, you can kind of manipulate it a little bit with the Q-tip, and once you feel like that little particle of dust is moving, you can take your blaster now and kind of get it off of there. So being very, very gentle. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. Okay, so now again, we're going to take this masking, put it face side down. We'll take our case. Now you'll turn the case over, look for the 6 o'clock position where the illuminator is. Okay, we'll flip that over. So now this is 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock. We're going to lift this up. Take our little pry tool again, lift up at the 6 o'clock or 12 o'clock position, doesn't really matter. take this piece out. Okay, we'll take our dust blaster again, blast away from the masking area. Okay, then we'll take our masking. Okay, give it one more blast here on both sides. Okay, lay the masking down with the analog clock, which is the circle part, in the top left position. And then gently manipulate that masking into the case. Give it a very careful tap down, making sure you're only tapping in the corners. Take the watch module itself, give this a quick blast as well, away from the case. And then again, we'll put that analog clock to match that portion right there. Kind of like that. Okay, you'll take your left or right index finger, go ahead and gently put pressure right on that battery case. Take something else that's thin here, and we're going to look for these tabs. So you see this really long silver tab that's running here, and there's another one here. Go ahead and start on the one at the 11 o'clock and pry it towards you gently. So you'll insert this here, and you'll hear a click. Okay, one more. Okay, and then this one on the bottom here as well. Pull it towards the center. And one more. There. Okay, and what that's doing is it's allowing those contact points to be positioned behind the pushers. So that way when you push on these 4 buttons, it actually hits that metal piece you readjusted, and then that metal piece interacts with the circuitry inside the watch module. Okay, again, 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock. Take your case back, and I like to orient my lettering on the Casio like this, so it's legible from the bottom, from the 6 o'clock position. So I go ahead and put that there. Oh, actually, we'll go ahead and take our O-ring first. So here's your O-ring. Okay, now you'll notice here at the very top of this O-ring, it has a little notch. See that notch? There's none over here, there's none here, and there's none over here. We're going to put that notch in the 12 o'clock position. If your O-ring is dry, because maybe this is an older watch that you're working on, you can go ahead and take a little bit of oil, rub the oil around the O-ring and clean off the excess. This is the oil that I use. Okay, really important to have that O-ring well lubricated, because of course that's what's going to give you your water resistance rating. Once that O-ring is sitting in that trough, okay, go ahead and take your case back. Look for that word Casio and orient it in this fashion. Put this back down. Okay, and then what I like to do is kind of pinch here, turn this over, and then put some support here on the back with your middle finger. And then what I'll do is take off the plastic if you have it, and really take a look at that display. So here's a nice look at our watch. And I really like these colors that Carlos chose. These look really good. Yeah, blue really pops. Sometimes the blue can be a little bit too dark, and your time and your map may not come out, but I think this looks really, really good. Of course, that deep amber yellow is really my favorite. It really helps that analog and those rotating triple hands to kind of pop there. So that looks good. What I'm going to be checking for here is if you remove this, go ahead and just throw this away. When I ship this, I put another piece of tape in. Check your borders here. And check the borders here, turn the watch to the left, the right, up and down. Make sure that there's no glue residue that's being squeezed into the display area. Make sure that you don't have any exposed bare monitor underneath. You should be able to you should not be able to see the white display. It should all be colored by the filter that you chose. Okay, and then what I'd like to do is push this button, the buttons here, just to make sure that our pushers are meeting those contacts that we adjusted. Okay, and then let's go ahead and go to the stopwatch. Let's push this one, and then this one. That works, and then let's test out the backlight. That's the top right, so that works as well. So now that tells me everything looks good and everything is functioning well. Okay, we'll go ahead and turn this, put this back down. At this point, because I've already removed this and this no longer sticks after you remove it, I like to protect the display. This is a soft work mat, but you never know. There might be small little shavings on there that might damage the very fragile display. Now once I got that tape on there, this is painter's tape because it doesn't leave a residue. I'll turn this back over. Again, it says illuminator here on this side and world time here, 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock, okay? Okay, let's zoom out a little bit here. Okay, once that's all set, go ahead and keep that pushed down. We're going to take our 4 screws here and insert those back where we found them. Okay, and then take your micro screwdriver. Gently screw these in. Keep it a little bit loose. Don't fully tighten yet. Okay, go ahead and lift up. Take a look between the case and the case back for that O-ring. It should not be visible. If it's showing, that means it's being pinched by the case back, and then your water resistance is going to be compromised. Once that looks good, go ahead and screw it down fully. Not too tight because these are metal screws and they're going into a resin case. And so if you do it too hard, the threads, the cut threads in the resin case might get stripped. Okay, so that looks pretty good there. Okay, now we're not going to put our bracelet on yet because for this one it's a little bit unique. We're going to be removing some of that lettering off. So we've done the hard part, I think, the filter work. I like to do the filter work before I do the label removal. The reason for that is, you know, when you're doing the label removal, you're working with fluids, you're working with the Goo Gone. And so if you have even a trace amount of that fluid that's running off the case, and then you open the case back, now you've got that Goo Gone going into the case. Now, I don't know how Goo Gone interacts with, you know, electricals. I don't know if it's going to do any damage, but I don't like to take that risk. Secondly, when you work with Goo Gone, even after you wash your fingers, there's always a little bit of a greasy residue, right? It's a little bit of a viscous solution. And so while you're touching your filters, you're touching the masking, you know, you're going to put some of that, that goo onto those materials. So you might as well get the clean part done and then do the, you know, what I would call the dirty part, the Goo Gone, last, okay? So we'll go ahead and take a nice clean microfiber towel, go ahead and lay that down, and we'll peel back just a little bit on this tape. Actually, let's get some fresh tape into here and redo this. Let's make it a little bit tighter so I can see that lettering clearly. So just like that, and maybe one more piece here on the bottom. There we go. Okay, now with Goo Gone, the way this works best, again, only in my experience, I've done about maybe 40 watches with the Goo Gone. So if you have more experience and you have some better tips, please put them down below. I would love to learn from you guys as well. So this is the Goo Gone here. What I like to do is I just put a little bit into the cap. Okay, not too much. There we go. Set that bottle carefully to the side where you won't knock it over. We're going to get our 2 Q-tips here. And I like to saturate the lettering first, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and put this Q-tip in. You can see the Goo Gone actually saturate the whole tip. And then I will just lightly coat the lettering with Goo Gone. Okay, and I'm not going to wipe it off. Then I'm going to flip this over and do the same thing to this side. Okay, I like to let that sit for maybe another 5 minutes. For me, in my experience, the more you let it sit, the less rubbing you have to do, and the less rubbing you have to do means that you preserve this painted silver finish a little bit better. As I mentioned, the silver case is really the best one to work with, because if you start doing that on like a darker case, like this, for example, this is the AE1300-1AV. What ends up happening is you have these areas here. So while we're waiting for that case on the bottom, let me show you this one. So this one has been rubbed off. Now, I don't know how clear I can make this for you, but okay, perfect. You see here I've rubbed off the lettering, and you can see here right where I rubbed off, it's a little bit lighter, and then the part of the case where I did not rub is a little bit darker. Now, you have to get this in the right light to really notice, but me, I'm a real stickler for detail, so I don't like to leave any blemishes as much as I can. The silver, you don't have that problem because the light streak mark that you see here, the light colored streak mark, kind of blends in with the silver case already because silver is also a light color. So just my opinion. Again, you might have a much better technique and you're able to get that lettering off without showing any blemishes. But that's just for me. So we'll let this sit and I'll chime back in with you guys in a few minutes. Okay, so it's been about 5 minutes. What we're going to do is take that same Q-tip. This one on the top is brand new. So this is my old one here. I'm going to resaturate it, and I'm going to focus just here on the world time. You're going to make nice, even strokes, apply a decent amount of pressure, and what you'll notice is as you first start rubbing, it's going to feel very smooth. And then as that glue gun starts to really wear away at the print, it's going to start feeling a little bit grittier on the Q-tip. Once it starts feeling gritty, that's how you know you're at the tail end and you're almost done there. Okay, this can take a while. It can take anywhere from a couple minutes. It can take even 5 or 10 minutes. It really depends on your pressure. So I'm going to put nice even pressure, and let's really zoom in here. I'm going to do the world time live on the camera, and then for the illuminator, I'm going to go ahead and just pause so that way I can save on your time here. So let's get this lettering off. Okay, once you feel like this is getting dry, go ahead and resaturate your Q-tip. Okay, you see that black part of the case right there on the top? Try to stay away from that as much as you can, because again, the black shows those blemishes of where you're rubbing. I can feel it's getting a little bit grittier. Okay, so that's only about 1 minute, and you can see it's already starting to rub off there. Okay. Okay, once you feel like you've got all the lettering off, go ahead and flip the Q-tip over, take the clean side, saturate that as well in the Goo Gone. Okay. Take your microfiber towel, gently wipe off the area you just rubbed off. Just have a nice clean area. Take that saturated clean Q-tip end and then go ahead and go over it one more time. Sometimes you can turn the case to the up, down, left, and right and just check for any residual marks. I can see that here a little bit. Okay, once you rub off, go ahead and clean it off again, and we'll check that off. So I still have a little bit more right here at the tip. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Okay, now if we look at this, you can see how well that silver kind of hides the rub marks, right? It's almost as if we didn't do anything at all, and this is how it came from the factory. So that to me looks good. Go ahead and repeat here for the bottom where it says illuminator as well. Now, before I pause here and do this off camera, this is another masking that I just use for different projects. This is not native to this watch, but some people have said, hey, how about removing the lettering from inside the masking? And so I've obviously done that here. I've left the word Casio, but I've removed the WR100, the 5 alarm. And this one, I spent a good amount of time. I tried to be careful, but if you look here at the top, you'll see here again where I rubbed, it's a little bit different of a finish than over here where I didn't rub. So, again, this is just because this is black. Black shows blemishes a lot easier. So, if you're asking me, do I prefer to remove the lettering off the masking? I would rather not, because I think it ruins the uniform appearance. For me, I also kind of like the lettering and the labels. It makes it look a little bit more retro. But again, if you are gentle enough, or maybe you let the Goo Gone sit long enough, maybe your results might be better than mine. But just something to be aware of. All right, guys, I'm going to remove the illuminator off camera and I'll check back in with you guys. Okay, so as you can see here, we were able to get that lettering off on the top and the bottom. Now it looks pretty good. Now I do want to say one other technique for the Q-tip with the Goo Gone is as you're working the Q-tip in, it's normal to kind of put the pointy end down, so basically be a little bit perpendicular with the Q-tip and rub back and forth. Just realize that at some point, all of that soft cotton is going to be worn down after you're putting that pressure on the case. And what ends up happening is you're going to end up grinding this hard part of the Q-tip at the tip here into the resin case. And if you don't realize that you're doing that, you're going to end up actually wearing out the finish and the paint on the silver case, and you actually could blemish the silver case, even though it's very hard to do. I did this the first time on my own personal watch, so let me show you what that looks like. So you can see here at the top, it looks nice and even. But then if you go to the bottom here, okay, you can see I wasn't even able to get off all of that lettering. And then even here, this is no longer lettering. This is actually down almost to the base resin. I've almost removed the silver paint on top. And again, the problem here was I was moving this Q-tip back and forth way too hard, and I was grinding this hard part of the Q-tip into that resin and rubbing it off. So this was actually the first time I removed a label. So this was done months and months ago. Since then, my technique has definitely gotten better, as you can see in Carlos's watch here. Another way that you can remove the lettering to be a little bit softer is, rather than put it at a perpendicular angle, you can kind of rub it this way. So saturate the Q-tip again all the way to the top with Goo Gone, and then you can rub it in this fashion. And what ends up happening here is you actually get more of the soft surface area of the Q-tip working for you. So it actually makes you work a little bit more efficiently. The lettering comes off a little bit quicker, but also you reduce the chance of this hard part of the Q-tip going into that resin and rubbing off the case. So you can just kind of do it like this as well from the side. So what I do is I start with the tip, and then once I feel like it's getting too hard down to the hard part of the Q-tip, I switch to the side. And if I see a lot of black lettering rubbing off on that side, I'll switch to a fresh side and rub that side in as well. Okay, so the key here is apply a firm amount of pressure, not too much. Take your time, keep your Q-tip tip well saturated, and use all sides, the tip and the sides of the Q-tip as well. Okay. All right, so now that we've got that lettering off the top and bottom of the case, let's go ahead and move back to reinstalling the bracelet. So with the Casio case oriented in this direction, and 6 o'clock here, 12 o'clock here, we're going to take the bracelet. You're going to turn the bracelet so that the word Casio on the buckle is in this orientation. Go ahead and put that down at the 6 o'clock position on the watch, and then go ahead and turn it over like that. We're going to take our 18 millimeter spring bar here. Insert it into one end of the lug. Take your lug removal tool. Use the thin end to push back on the opposite end of that spring bar. Insert the spring bar into the other hole, and then give the bracelet a little jiggle just to make sure the spring bar settles into its housing. We're going to repeat the same for the other side as well. And that looks pretty good. So let's grab the watch case for Carlos here. And we'll take this piece of white protective paper, slip this back underneath the case, or the clasp. So sometimes you probably won't have to worry about this because you're probably not going to be shipping this out to anybody, but it can be a little bit tricky to get this paper back in. Okay, there we go. Okay, then what we'll do is take the watch and put it back on the display stand here, and let's take a look at our work. We're at the home stretch here. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to do one quick wipe I forgot to do on the case back just to get any of the fingerprints off from there. All right. And so now that's good. Now before we do a roll around, let's check all the functions here. Looks good. Let's go to the timer. That's working. And the light. Okay, so in the light, because you're using a blue filter, the yellow analog will show up pretty well. You can still see the rest of the clock, but it's going to be much dimmer compared to the stock because, of course, you have a darker colored filter compared to the clear factory filter. So that's completely normal for this mod. Okay, now let's go ahead and set the times. I like to do that so that way when the customer gets it, they can just throw this guy on and be ready to use it. So you'll hold down the adjust button here. You'll cycle through which part to adjust with the bottom left button here. So let's put this on, they don't have SFO, but we have LAX, which is also the same. So we'll set it there. We'll set the time to, it should be 2:55 p.m. So top button moves the clock down and bottom moves it up. So we'll set this to 2 and then set this to 55. Okay, push this bottom left one more time. Let's go to the year. So we're at 2020. And the month is April, and we are on the 6th today. Perfect. And then once you're done, you push the top left. Great. So there we go. Carlos is ready to rock and roll when he gets this. And let's go ahead and give you guys a quick roll around here of the watch. Okay. All right, everyone. So that'll do it for today's video. Again, this is not a usual mod that I do, but I really had a lot of fun putting this together. I like Carlos's kind of eye for design here with that blue and that yellow. I think he chose these colors well, and we'll get this in the mail for him today. If you have any comments or questions about any of the materials, any of the procedures that you saw in this video, please put it down below. I'm sure there's a ton of people out there who have much more experience than me, so please, please, please share some brand new tips with me. I'm always trying to learn and trying to reach out and connect with new people who love modifying these Casios, so I would love to hear from you guys too. Thanks again, guys. Tune in for the next one, and as always, have fun and be safe out there.